But hey, maybe it will be ready in the next devlog. Hard to tell with my upload schedule when that will be. Okay, that aged like a fine wine. So, it has been 3 months since the last devlog and 2 months since the last update. Where have I been? Well, as you may remember, my game up until this point didn't look too hot. In fact, most of my levels are at grey boxing stage. Therefore, 3 months ago I decided to change that, at least for my Mars level. I concepted, blocked out, prototyped, cut, UV'd, high poly'd, textured, and tested. Ladies and... wait, who am I kidding? Gentlemen, these are the fruits of my hard labor. Countless hours of things I've just mentioned before and won't say again. Prepare to be amazed. But first, let's talk about how easy it is to make models. This is generally done by a skilled artist who uses a great deal of imagination to put your vague ideas on a piece of paper. It of course helps if you have some references of materials or similar objects. Funny enough, in some cases the concept art will end up looking better than the actual model you'll create later. This is just to give you an idea of how skilled these professional artists are. And then there is my concept art. Fortunately, thanks to a text next to it, it's enough for me to remember how the model looks and what it does. If it is an interactable object, like in this case, I have to think about how it affects gameplay. For example, how big it should be, how much detail should it have, will it be animated, and so on. Then, after writing these main points down, I continue on to the next step. This is probably a stage where I do the most iterating. I start out with basic shapes, then I add more and more detail, and then something changes in gameplay or I simply don't like it, so I start over. In this case, I changed the design radically 3 times, just because I felt like some designs restricted gameplay in one way or another. The next step is optional, but I would say it's a good practice in case of VR games. So you bet it's mandatory for us. We take a block out, or rather at this stage, more detailed grey box almost final model, and chuck it into the engine of our choice. Then we place it in the scene and make notes. For flat screen games, this step is not that important. Simply because unlike in VR, where you get literally sucked into another world that surrounds you, with a flat screen you are more like an observer. It's hard to explain, but the fact is that the perspective gets different in VR. What might look good on a screen when you're modeling it will, for example, look too small when you put on a headset. As I discovered, it is generally better to make things big for VR. So after a couple of changes based on the notes we made before, we finalize our model and we are ready for the next big step. Hey, so I understand what maps are, but UV maps? You're asking what the UV stands for. Well, it stands for... The letters U and V denote the axes of 2D texture because X, Y, and Z are already used to denote the axes of 3D object in model space, while W, in addition to X, Y, and Z, is used to calculating quaternion rotations, a common operation in computer graphics. Okay, thanks for that, but what are UV maps? Oh, you meant like, what are they good for and how they work? Alright, it's pretty simple. When you paint your model, you need a texture. Your model occupies a 3D space. It has 3 dimensions, but your texture has only 2. So you have to basically make your model a 2D representation of its 3D self in order to texture it. But how do we do that? We cut the model in 3D space. The red lines here are the cuts. And then we say, unwrap me this model, Blender. And that's basically it. It's like making an origami, but in reverse. Of course, some sort of cleanup has to be done sometimes, because a couple of pieces get unwrapped in really weird ways. Plus, I try to save some space on texture by mirroring and overlaying a couple of islands. This is a common practice, but I didn't hear many people talk about it. So let's pretend I just gave you a secret ingredient for my excellent UV soup recipe or something. No, don't leave. This is not some kind of scheme to sell you an HP laptop. It's another acronym. It stands for, and I know this one, high poly model. But what are polys? Well, these little fellas, polygons. Not the lines, but this whole thing. And as you can probably tell, high poly means there is a lot of these in one model, and therefore the model can have greater detail in it. This sounds nice, right? Everyone wants to have a nice looking models with great details. But there is a catch. Of course there is. High poly models are too expensive. Not like that, I meant performance wise. It is cheaper to cheat a little and make a low poly model and then bake the detail from high poly model onto it. And now comes my brilliance. Making high poly models is a bit time consuming, so if you ask me, I always do a little extra cheating to save some time. Basically, the creation of my high poly models looks somewhat like this. Oh, here's a hard edge, let's smooth it out. Oh, and there's another, and another, and another. Let's smooth everything out. Perfection. Alright, jokes aside, this is what my high poly model looks like after my special HP treatment. At first glance it doesn't look like much have changed, but believe me, it will look great after baking. And with this we are making our way to the final step.
Anybody can put a little masterpiece on canvas with just a little bit of practice.
Yes, my favorite part. You either make something look nice or end up with texture and have to start over. This isn't something I can explain. For me, it's more like trial and error. Normally you would rely heavily on your concept art and references, but as I explained before, this is more of a doodle than a concept art. So I'm trying to come up with a design using only my imagination and the references I have at hand. But generally the first thing you do is baking, and it goes without saying that you won't have any unexpected problems whatsoever while baking. Just click here and wait for a perfect result. Then we employ our previously mentioned buffed imagination and pick a color for that bad boy. Dirty him up and highlight the edges. After a while you may end up with something like this, and textures are ready to be exported. Look, I know I simplified the texturing part a lot, but you might not know that. So please, do know that the texturing things right takes time. How much exactly? Well, alright, now that we talked about each step of the process, you hopefully understand how much time it takes to make one model. Now repeat this whole process about 8,000 times until you have every single object in the scene modeled and textured. If I would work in a team, my journey would end here. But since I'm a solo developer, you get to see one more step. Oh, how I love this point and click adventure. You get to drag and drop every single folder with your models and textures. Then you have to extract materials into a special folder, then set up those materials so they have all 3 textures in them. Look, you click here, search for it, click on it, fix it, and repeat. Now this is what I call gameplay. But wait, that's not all. At this stage your models still won't look good. Why? Lights. This is fortunately more entertaining. You get to drag, drop, position, intensify, color, click, and generate. If you would like to know more about lighting, let me know, but I think I pretty much covered it right here. So that is that, and let's examine what we created. Well, it really does look great on my Quest 2. There is just the right amount of detail I want people to see. Any more resolution on this wildly adopted device and I bet it would look noticeably fuzzy and ruin the experience. It's a good thing that no new cheap headset was announced. No. Ah, fuck. Hey, so I just finished the video. It took longer than I thought, like a lot, so Thank you for watching, and please do let me know if you liked it or if you didn't, because as you've seen it was a little different than the usual devlog. But if you're new here and like this devlog, maybe check out the previous one.